of the Arabian Nights here before me. This one is the Newbery Classics edition, David McKay edition, illustrated by Harry G. Thieker. Now, I'm not going to be doing the whole book as with other short story readings. I'm just going to be doing, in this case, the first chapter of this collection of short stories. Once again, if you wish to hear more from this book in particular, please let me know in the comments, and I will be happy to add them onto my list. So let's begin, shall we? Chapter 1. The Princess, Parizade, and the Talking Bird, the Singing Tree, and the Golden Water. Once there was a sultan of Persia named Khosrowshaw, who took great delight in adventures. He often walked in disguise throughout the city and met with many wonderful experiences. It happened one night that he clad himself in the robe of a merchant and, accompanied by his vizier, went forth from his palace, seeking an adventure. As he passed through a mean street, he heard loud talking, and approaching the house from which the sounds came, he saw through the open door 3 sisters seated upon a couch, conversing together. "I wish," said the eldest sister, "that I might marry the Sultan's chief baker, for then I should have all the white bread I desired. And now, oh my sisters, let me see if your tastes are as good as mine." "For my part," answered the second sister, "I wish I were the wife to the Sultan's chief cook, for then I should always eat the most delicious food. Therefore thou seest, O my sister, that my taste is better than thine." The youngest sister, who was also very beautiful and had more charm and wit than the other 2, spoke in her turn. "I wish, O my sisters," said she, "that I might be the Sultan's wife. I would make him the father of a prince, whose hair would be gold on one side of his head and silver on the other. When he cried, his tears should be pearls, and when he smiled, his red lips should look like a rosebud, fresh blown." The Sultan, having overheard their wishes, immediately told the vizier to take notice of the house and bring the 3 sisters before him on the next day. The morning having arrived, the vizier went to the house of the sisters and summoned them to appear before the Sultan. He conducted them to the palace and presented them to the Sultan, who said, "Do you remember the wishes you expressed last night, when you were all in so pleasant a mood? Speak the truth." On hearing these words, the sisters were confounded. They cast down their eyes and blushed with confusion, and the color that rose in the cheeks of the youngest captivated the heart of the Sultan. He, seeing their confusion and fear, said to them, "Do not be alarmed. I know your wishes, and will relieve you from your fears. As for the damsel who desired to become my wife, she shall have her wish this day, and her 2 elder sisters shall be married to my chief baker and chief cook." As soon as the Sultan had said these words, he gave orders that the marriages should be celebrated immediately. As for the youngest sister, he caused her to be clad in magnificent garments, commanded the city to be decorated and the drums to be beaten, and a great feast to be held. He then performed his marriage to her with all the pomp and ceremony. As for the 2 elder sisters, he gave them in marriage to his chief baker and chief cook, and conducted the marriages in accordance with their humble positions in life. The elder sisters, when they beheld the grandeur of their younger sister's marriage feast, were filled with greatest jealousy. They continued to give themselves up to this evil passion until at last they decided to revenge themselves by injuring their sister, who was now the sultana. In the meantime, they pretended to rejoice at her good fortune and visited her continually, showing her every mark of affection. The sultana received them with esteem and love and bestowed favors upon them. So matters continued for some months, when the sultan went forth to hunt, and while he was absent from the palace, there was born to the sultana a young prince, as beautiful as the full moon. The wicked sisters wrapped him in some clothes and put him in a basket which they secretly carried to the stream that ran through the royal park. They placed the basket in the water and left it there. They then returned to the palace and laid a little dog in the cradle. When the sultan came from the hunt, the two wicked sisters told him that instead of a son there had been born a little dog, which they showed him. Upon hearing this, the sultan was filled with rage, and would have ordered the sultana to be executed at once if his vizier had not persuaded him to permit her to live. As for the little prince, the basket which he was in was carried down the stream, and as destiny would have it, the chief gardener of the royal gardens was walking by the side of the stream and perceived the basket floating past. He drew it to the shore, and on opening it, was astonished to see in it a beautiful newborn child. As the gardener had no children, he rejoiced exceedingly, and carried the young prince to his wife, saying, "Behold, the little one that Allah hath sent us. Nurse him as though he were your own, and from now on I shall call him my son." The wife received the child with the greatest joy and cared for him with tenderness. The following year, when the sultan was again absent at the hunt, there was born to the sultana another beautiful prince. As soon as the wicked sisters beheld him, they placed him in a basket and set him adrift upon the stream, and put in his cradle a yellow cat. When the sultan returned and saw the cat, he would have executed his wife immediately if their vizier had not once again remonstrated. As before, the gardener was walking by the stream, and finding the little prince, took him to his wife and bade her care of him as if he were now their son. Now some months after this there was born to the sultana a lovely princess, whom the wicked sisters sent adrift upon the water, and whom the gardener rescued as he had her two brothers. This time the evil woman placed a mouse in the cradle, and when the sultan saw it, he was so angry that he caused the sultana to be imprisoned in a wooden cage and hung on the wall of the palace, where she would be exposed to the insults and contempt of the populace. She bore the punishment which she did not deserve with such a patient resignation that she aroused the compassion of all who saw her. As for the two princes and princess, they were cared for tenderly by the gardener and his wife, and as they grew older they showed marks of their superior dignity, which distinguished them from all common children. The eldest prince was called Bahman, the second Pervez, and the princess Parizade. The gardener, perceiving that they were remarkable children, provided instructors for them and caused them to be taught the arts and sciences and polite literature. The princes became accomplished horsemen, and the princess received lessons in music and learned to sing and play upon all sorts of instruments. The brothers and sister made such wonderful progress, their instructors were amazed and soon confessed that they could teach them no more. The gardener was so delighted to find his adopted children accomplished and perfect in body and mind that he resolved to do still more for them. As he had considerable wealth, he built them a magnificent house, situated in a large park, and spared no expense in furnishing the mansion and beautifying the park. His wife dying, he retired with his children to this fine residence, and continued to live there in joy and happiness for some time. When the two princes reached manhood, the gardener suddenly became ill and died, leaving all his possessions to the two princes and the princess Parizade. They mourned his loss as a tender father, and could mansion satisfied with their fortune and free from the desire of the mingling with the great. It happened one day that the two princes went out to hunt, and the princess remained at home. Scarcely had the two brothers left when an old woman knocked at the door and requested that she might be permitted to say her prayers in the little chapel that adjoined the house. The slaves thereupon asked permission of the princess, and she bade them conduct the old woman to the chapel, and afterwards show her the house and gardens, and then bring her into the great hall. The slaves did as they were commanded, and after the old woman had said her prayers, they led her through the garden and showed her the house, and then presented her to the princess. The old woman was astonished by the magnificence of the furniture and the decorations of the mansion, and when she beheld the beautiful Princess Parizade seated upon an ivory couch overlaid with red gold, she was filled with wonder, and falling down kissed the floor before her. The princess, however, raised her and placed her upon the couch, commanding her slaves to serve a repast. They did so at once, and set before the old woman a low table of mother of pearl and ebony, upon which a china dish full of delicate pastry and other dishes containing delicious fruits and confections. "Eat, O my mother," said the princess, "for thou must be hungry after coming so far." "O my mistress," replied the old woman, "I will not refuse what Allah has sent me by thy generous hand." And she ate and refreshed herself, after which the princess asked her how she liked the mansion. "O my mistress," said the old woman, "in truth it is beautiful. Its situation is most agreeable, and no garden could be more delightful. But if thou wilt permit me to speak truly, there are still wanting 3 things to complete thy house." "O my mother," said the Princess Parizade, "what are the 3 things? I beg thee to tell me what they are, for I will spare nothing to get them." "First of these things," replied the old woman, "is the talking bird, which is so wonderful a creature that it draweth around it all the singing birds of the neighborhood. The second is the singing tree, the leaves of which are so many mouths which sing in 1,000 different voices, and never cease. The third is the golden water, a single drop of which, if poured into a fountain, increaseth it, so that it filleth at once the basin of the fountain, rising in the middle to a great height, continually playeth, but never overfloweth." "Oh, my mother," cried the princess, "I am grateful to thee for describing these rarities. They are surprising and wonderful. Tell me where they may be found." "I should be unworthy of thy hospitality," answered the old woman, "if I refused to satisfy thy curiosity. Know that these rarities are to be found at the borders of the kingdom of India. The road to this spot passeth beyond thy door, and whosoever followeth the road for 20 days, and asketh the first person whom he meeteth where the talking bird, and the singing tree, and the golden water may be found, he will be informed." After saying this, the old woman rose from her seat, saluted the princess, and departed. When the 2 brothers returned from the hunt, they entered the hall, and finding the Princess Parizade sad and pensive, they were surprised to see her thus, and asked her what had happened in their absence. "Oh, my brothers," replied the princess, "I am greatly distressed in my mind. Ye think, and I have always thought, that this house is so complete, and that nothing is wanting, but this day I have learned that it is wanteth 3 rarities, which would render it more perfect than any other house in the world. These 3 things are the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water." Thereupon the princess told them of all that had happened while they were gone, adding that she would never be completely happy while the house was imperfect. "Oh, my sister," said Prince Brahman, "nothing can concern thee in which we are not an equal interest. It is enough that thou hast an earnest desire for these 3 rarities, therefore I will undertake to procure them for thee. Only tell me the place and the way to it, and I will go tomorrow." "Oh, my brother," said the Prince Parizade, "thou art the eldest and head of the family, therefore permit me to undertake this adventure, and do thou stay at home and guard our sister?" "Nay," answered the Prince Bahman, "I will have resolved to go on this journey and procure those rarities, and am convinced that I shall succeed. Do thou stay at home with our sister and care for the house." After this, Prince Bahman spent the remainder of the day making preparations for the journey. When the morning arrived, Prince Bahman mounted his horse, and pulling a knife from his belt, presented it to the princess, saying, "Take this knife, O my sister, and look at it every day, while thou seest bright as it is now. Know that I am alive, but should thou see it stained with blood, then believe me dead." After seeing this, he bade farewell to the princess and his brother and rode away. The prince proceeded upon his journey, turning neither to the right hand nor the left, and he pursued his way for 20 days. When the 20th day arrived, he saw on the side of the road a hideous old man who sat underneath a tree. His eyebrows were white as snow, and his hair and beard were also white and hung down to his feet. The nails of his fingers and toes were long like claws of a beast, and he wore no clothes, only a mat that was thrown round his body, and a flat umbrella over his head. Prince Bahman immediately dismounted and advanced towards him and saluted him. The old man tried to return the salutation, but could not do so because his beard had grown over his mouth. The prince, perceiving this, took the sword and cut away the beard. At this the old man smiled and said, "O my master, I am grateful to thee for this kind service, and therefore ask what thou wilt, and if possible, I will do it for thee." Hearing this, Prince Bahman rejoiced, and said, "Know, O my father, that I am in search of Talking Bird, and the Singing Tree, and the Golden Water. I am assured that they are not far from here, but I cannot tell exactly in what place they may be found. Therefore, I conjure thee to show me the road thither." At hearing this, the old man changed countenance, and hung down his head towards the ground, and remained silent. "O my father," said the prince, "dost thou not hear me? Tell me whether thou knowest what the rarities are, so that I may go on my way." At last the old man raised his head, and said, "Know, O my son, that the way thither is beset with great dangers. A number of princes, bravery and courage, have gone thither and never returned. Therefore, if thou hast any regard for thy life, take my advice and hasten to thy home." "I am resolved to procure the 3 rarities," replied Prince Bahman, "and I am well armed and as brave as any one. Therefore I will not turn back." But they who will attack thee," said the old man, "are invisible persons, against whom thou cannot defend thyself." "It mattereth not," replied the prince. "All thou sayest shall not persuade me to give up my quest. Since thou knowest the way, I conjure thee once more to tell me of it." The old man, then seeing he could not prevail upon Prince Bahman to abandon his journey, put his hand into a bag that lay before him and pulled out a small bowl, which he gave to the prince, saying, "Take this, mount thy horse, and throw the bowl before thee. Follow it to the foot of the mountain where it will stop. Then alight from thy horse, throw the bridle over its neck, and he will stand in the same place till thou returnest. Climb the mountain. Thou wilt see on thy right hand and left a great number of black stones, and will hear on all sides a confusion of voices, which will utter 1,000 abusive words to discourage thee, and prevent thee from reaching the summit of the mountain. Be not afraid, but above all things, do not turn thy head to look at thee. For in a minute, be not afraid, but above all things, do not turn thy head to look behind thee. For in the minute thou turnest thy head, thou wilt be changed into a black stone, like those about thee, all of which stones were formerly princes who failed in this enterprise. If thou escape this danger, and get to the top of the mountain, thou wilt see a cage in which is the Talking Bird. Ask him where the Singing Tree and the Golden Water, and he will tell thee. But if thou art prudent, now, before it is too late, thou wilt return home, and not risk thy life." Prince Bahman, hearing these words, thanked the old man, and and mounting his horse swiftly took the bowl and threw it before him. The bowl rolled away and ceased not to roll, the prince following it until it reached the foot of a great mountain. The prince alighted from the horse, laid the bridle upon its neck, and began to climb the mountain, which was covered on all sides with black stones. Instantly he heard voices calling and shouting. Some said, "Where is the fool going? Where would he have? Do not let him pass." Others cried out, "Stop him, stop him, catch him, kill him." And still others called out with a voice like thunder, "Thief, assassin, murderer." While some in a mocking tone cried out, "No, no, do not hurt him. Let the pretty fellow pass. The cage and the bird are kept for him." Notwithstanding all these cries, Prince Bahman continued to climb with courage and resolution for some time, but the voices grew louder and louder, and made such a din near him and behind him and before him, that at last he was seized with dread. His legs trembled beneath him, and he staggered, finding his true strength failing. He forgot the old man's advice, and turned around to run down the mountain. In an instant, he was changed into a black stone, and his horse also underwent the same transformation. Thus, it happened to Prince Bahman. As for the Princess Parizade, she always wore the knife the prince had given her within her girdle, and she pulled it out several times a day to see whether her brother were alive or dead. On the day that the Prince Bahman was transformed into a black stone, his Prince Paravis and Princess were talking together. She drew out the knife and examined it, and lo, the blood was running down its point. Seeing this, the princess was filled with horror and grief, and threw the knife down. "Oh, my brother," cried she, "I have been the cause of thy death, and I shall never see thee more. Why did I tell thee of the talking bird and the singing tree and the golden water? And what is it to me whether our house shall be complete or not?" Prince Pervez was as much afflicted at the death of Prince Bahman as the princess, but knowing that she was still passionately wished to possess the three rarities, he interrupted her, saying, "Oh, my sister, our regret for our brother is in vain and useless. Our lamentations and grief cannot restore him to life. Let us believe that his death was caused by some error on his part, or by an accident. As for me, I have resolved to obtain the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water, and nothing can alter my resolution. Tomorrow I will depart." Hearing this, the princess did all she could to dissuade the Prince Pervez from making the attempt, but her remonstrances had no effect upon him. Before he departed, he presented her with a string of 100 pearls, bidding her to count them each day, saying that if any time they remained fixed, it would be a certain sign that he had met the same fate as his brother. Prince Pervez, on the 20th day after his departure, met the old man in the same place in which his brother Bahman had met him. He advanced towards him, and saluting him, asked if he could tell him where to find the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water. The old man told him of the many dangers that would beset him on the road ahead on this adventure, and said that the young man very much resembled Prince Pervez, had lately passed that way, and he had not returned, and so had in all probability had shared the fate of the other princes and been turned into a black stone. "Oh, my master," replied Prince Pervez, "I know of whom thou speakest. He was my eldest brother, and I know certainly that he is dead, though I know not the cause. I am now determined to procure thee 3 rarities, and therefore I beg of thee that thou wilt show me the way. Since I cannot prevail upon thee to give up this enterprise," replied the old man, "I will do what I can to aid thee." He then presented Prince Pervez with the magic bowl, and gave him the same directions he had given to Prince Bahman. The prince thanked the old man, and then, throwing the bowl before his horse, followed it. When the bowl came to the foot of the mountain, it stopped. The prince alighted and began to ascend, and before he had gone 6 steps, he heard a voice behind him, which seemed to be near, saying in an indulgent tone, "Stay, rash youth, that I may punish thee for thy presumption." Hearing this, the prince, forgetting the old man's advice, drew his sword and turned about to revenge himself, and instantly he and his horse were changed into black stones. In the meantime, Princess Parizade counted the pearls every night, and when she went to bed, put the string about her neck, and the first thing in the morning, she counted them over the pearls to see if they would slide. The day that the prince was changed into a black stone, she was counting them over as usual, when all at once they became immovable, and she knew that Prince Parizade was dead. She lost no time in vain grief, but disguising herself in a man's apparel, she armed and set out immediately, taking the same road that her brothers had followed. On the 20th day, she saw the old man sitting beside the road, and alighting from her horse, went and sat down beside him, saying, "Oh, my master, permit me to rest myself, and do me the favor to tell me where in the neighborhood may be found a talking bird, a singing tree, and some golden water." "Oh, my princess," replied the old man, "for so I must call thee, for I perceive thee to be a princess in disguise. I know the place well where these rarities may be found, but the enterprise is dangerous. Take my advice, go no further, and do not urge me to tell thee what will prove thy destruction." "Oh, good father," said the princess, "I have traveled a great way and shouldn't be sorry to return without hearing these wonders. Tell me what these difficulties and dangers are, then I may judge whether I am courageous enough to brave them." The old man thereupon repeated to the princess all that he had said to Princes Bahman and Perviz. He then begged her to give up the enterprise and return to her home. But she replied, "I understand, with the greatest difficulty, is getting to the top of the mountain without being frightened at the terrible din of voices I shall hear. I own that I am terrified at the thought of the voices, but I intend to stop my ears with cotton, and no matter how awful and loud the sounds may be, I shall not hear them." "Oh, my princess," said the old man, "of all the persons who have asked me their way, thou art the only person who hath made use of this device. They have all perished, but if thou persist in thy design, it may be that thou wilt succeed. Nevertheless, I advise thee not to expose thyself to this danger." The princess, however, being resolved to pursue her quest, the old man presented her with the bowl. Then, thanking him, she mounted her horse, threw the bowl before her, and rolled away. She followed it till it stopped at the foot of the mountain. Where she alighted, she filled her ears with cotton and began to climb. She heard the voices somewhat, and the higher she went, the louder, more numerous the voices seemed, but they were not loud enough to terrify her. She laughed and continued to climb upward. At last, she got so high that she could see the cage and the talking bird. The minute the latter saw her, he cried out in thundering tones, "Retire, fool, and approach no nearer." The princess, however, redoubled her speed and gained the summit of the mountain, which was level. Then, running directly to the cage, she laid her hand upon it and cried, "Out, bird, I have thee, and thou shalt not escape me." She then pulled the cotton out of her ears. "Oh, heroic princess," said the bird in gentle tones, "be not angry with me for speaking to thee so rudely. I have lived a most happy life on this mountain top, and do not wish to be a slave of anyone. Since, however, a slave I must be, I would rather belong to thee than any other princess. From this moment I swear fidelity to thee, and entire submission to thy commands. I know who thou art. Thou dost not know. The time will come when I shall do thee a great service. am ready to obey thee." Hearing this, the princess was filled with joy. "Bird," she said, "I have been told that there is not far off a golden water, the property of which is very wonderful. Before all things, I ask thee to tell me where it is." The talking bird showed her the place which was nearby, and she went and filled a silver flagon, which she had brought with her. She returned to the bird and said, "This is not enough. I want also the singing tree. Tell me where it is." "Turn about," said the talking bird, "and thou wilt see it behind thee a wood, where thou wilt find the singing tree. Break off a branch and carry it home and plant in thy garden. It will take root as soon as it was put into the earth, and in a short time it will grow into a fine large tree." The princess at once went into the wood, and following the sounds and sweet, harmonious voices, found the tree soon. She broke off a branch and returned to the talking bird. "Bird," said she, "what thou hast done for me is not sufficient. Thou hast been the cause of the death of my 2 brothers, who must be among the black stones that I saw while climbing the mountains. I wish to take them home with me." The talking bird seemed reluctant to satisfy the princess, and indeed at first refused to reply. "Bird," said the princess, "remember that thou art my slave. Thy life is at my disposal." "That I cannot deny," replied the talking bird, "but although what thou asked is difficult, yet will I do it for thee. At thy feet is a little pitcher full of magic water. Take it, and as thou descendest the mountain, sprinkle a little of the water upon each black stone." The princess, perceiving the little pitcher, took it up, and carrying with her the cage and the talking bird, the flagon of golden water, and the branch of the singing tree, began to descend the mountain. As she went, she threw a little of the magic water upon each black stone, and immediately changed into a man. As she did not miss a single stone, the horses and the 2 princes, her brothers, and all the other princes resumed their natural forms. The Princess Bahman and Perviz instantly recognized their sister and ran to embrace her. She returned their embraces and expressed her delight. Thereupon she told them all that had happened to her, from the beginning to end, and showed them the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water. Her brothers were delighted and filled with gratitude. They expressed their thanks for all that she had done for them. The other princes, who had been Blackstones, learning of how she restored them to life, declared themselves her slaves, saying that they were ready to obey her in all things. "Indeed," replied the princess, "as my intention was solely to recover my brothers, ye owe me nothing. Ye are, instead, free as when ye journeyed hither to procure these rarities. Let us, however, stay no longer at this place, but mount our horses and return to our homes." Thereupon they all mounted their horses and rode until they came to the old man, whom they found dead, either from old age or because he was no longer needed to show the way to the 3 rarities. All the princes who had come from the other countries here took grateful leave of the Princess Parizade and her 2 brothers and rode away. As for the princess, when she arrived at her house, she placed the talking bird in the garden, and he was no sooner began to warble than he was surrounded with nightingales, larks, linnets, golden finches, and every kind of delightful bird. And the singing tree was no sooner set in the earth than it took root and began to become a great tree, the leaves of which gave out a melodious concert. A large basin of beautiful marble was placed in the garden, and in it the princess poured the golden water, which increased at once so that it reached the top of the basin, and then formed a fountain in the center which shot 20 feet into the air, again fell into the basin without overflowing. The fame of these wonders was pleasantly spread abroad, and a great many people came to admire them. Some days after their return, the Princess Bahman and Perviz mounted their horses and went forth to hunt. They were but but 2 or 3 leagues from their house when they perceived the Sultan Khorasha in pursuit of game. As they met him in a narrow path from which they could not retreat without being seen, they alighted from their horses and prostrated themselves before him without lifting their heads. The Sultan, he saw they were well dressed and finely mounted, was curious to see their faces and commanded them to rise. The princes did so with such an air of ease and grace that the Sultan looked at them for some time before he spoke. He then asked who they were and where they lived. "Oh, my lord," said Prince Bahman, "we are the sons of thy late chief gardener, and live in a house that he built before he died. "By what I perceive," replied the Sultan, "ye love hunting, therefore follow me and choose your own game." The princes mounted their horses again and followed the Sultan, but they had not gone far when they saw many wild beasts together. Prince Bahman chose a lion, and Prince Pervez a bear, which they chased with such courage and attacked with such skill, the Sultan was filled with admiration and amazement. In short, he conceived so great an interest in these 2 princes that he ordered them to present themselves before him at the palace the next day. But Prince Bahman replied, "Oh, my lord, we beg thee to excuse us. We have a sister younger than ourselves, with whom we live in such perfect union that we undertake nothing before asking our advice." "Consult thy sister," replied the Sultan, "and meet me here tomorrow and give me an answer." The princes went home, but forgot to tell the princess of their adventures with the Sultan, and his command to present themselves at his palace. Yet the next morning they did not fail to meet him at the place appointed. "Well," said the Sultan, "have you spoken to your sister?" At this the 2 princes looked at each other and blushed. "Oh, my lord," said Prince Bahman, "we pray thee to excuse us, for both my brother and I forgot." "Then remember today," replied the Sultan, "and bring me an answer here tomorrow." The princes again forgot to inform their sister of the event, and the next day presented themselves before the Sultan as before. He again forgave their negligence. To prevent their forgetting a 3rd time, however, he presented Prince Bahman with 3 little golden balls, saying, "Place these in thy bosom, and thy noise they will make falling out on the floor when thou dost undress will remind thee, if thou dost not remember before." The event happened just as the Sultan had foreseen. Without the balls, the princes would not have thought of speaking to their sister of this affair. But as Prince Bahman unloosened his girdle to go to bed, the balls dropped upon the floor. He then called Prince Pervez, and they both went into the apartment of Princess Parizade, to whom they told all that had happened from first to last. The princess was astonished at this news, and said, "I fear much lest your meeting with the Sultan may separate you from me. However, as sultans will be obeyed in all things, it may be dangerous for you to oppose the command of Sultan Khorasha. Otherwise, I should advise you not to present yourselves before him. But before we decide on the matter, let us consult the talking bird and hear what he has to say, for he is very wise and hath promised me his assistance in all difficulties." The princess then sent for the cage, after which she related to the bird all that had happened. He answered, "The princess, thy brothers must obey the Sultan's command, and in their turn invite him to come see thy house." The next morning, the princes met the Sultan hunting, and he asked them if they had remembered to speak to their sister. "Yes, O my lord," replied Prince Bahman, "we have obtained her consent, and we await with impatience the time to present ourselves before thee." The Sultan, delighted at hearing these words, ordered the princes to ride there beside his horse and accompany him to his palace. They did so, and entered the city-state. Sultan entered his palace and ordered a feast to be prepared. He then entertained the princes magnificently and clad them in robes of honor and talked with them. When night approached, the brothers kissed the ground before the Sultan and asked his permission to return to their sister, saying, "O our lord, when thou goest hunting, wilt thou not do us the honor to visit our house and refresh thyself? It is not worthy of thy presence, but sultans sometimes have vouchsafed to take shelter at a cottage." "Oh, my children," replied the Sultan, "your house cannot be otherwise than beautiful and worthy of its owners. Tomorrow morning I will be at the place where I first met you. Meet me there, and ye shall be my guides." When the princes Bahman and Perviz had returned home, they gave the princess an account of the distinguished response the Sultan had given them, and told her that he would visit their house the next morning. "Then," said the princess, "we must prepare a repast fit for a sultan, and I will consult the talking bird. Perhaps he will tell us what is appropriate for the occasion." The princess approved of her plans, and after they had retired, she consulted the bird alone. "Bird," she said, "the Sultan will do us the honor tomorrow to come and visit our mansion. Tell us what we must do to entertain him in a fitting manner." "Oh, good mistress," replied the talking bird, "thou hast excellent cooks. Tell them to do the best they can, but above all, let them prepare a dish of cucumbers stuffed with pearls, which must be set before the Sultan in the first course before any other dishes." "Cucumbers stuffed with pearls!" exclaimed the Princess Parizade with amazement. "Surely, bird, thou knowest not what thou sayest. It is an unheard-of dish. Besides, all the pearls I have are not enough for such a dish." "Oh, my mistress," answered the talking bird, "do what I say, and be not uneasy about what will happen. Nothing but good will follow. As for the pearls, go early tomorrow morning to the foot of the first tree on thy right hand of the garden. Dig under it, and thou wilt find more pearls than thou needest." When morning arrived, the princess, attended by a gardener, went early to the tree which the talking bird had told her of, and bade the man to dig at its foot. He did so, and soon struck something hard with his spade, and presently uncovered a golden box, about a foot square, which he handed to the princess. Upon opening it, she saw it was full of magnificent pearls. She shut the box and returned with it to the house, while the gardener threw the earth into the hole at the foot of the tree. The princess then called the chief cook and gave him directions for preparing the banquet, saying, "Besides all this, thou must prepare an extraordinary dish for the Sultan's own eating, composed of cucumbers stuffed with these pearls." And at the same time she opened the golden box and showed him the pearls. The chief cook, though filled with astonishment at such an order, took the box and returned to the kitchen. The next day the two princes went to the place appointed, and as soon as the Sultan arrived, the hunt began, and lasted till midday, when Prince Bahman had then conducted the Sultan to the house, while Prince Perviz rode on to announce their coming to Princess Parizade. When the Sultan entered the courtyard, the princess, approaching, threw herself at his feet and saluted him. He raised her, and after gazing for some time upon her beauty and loveliness, he said, "Verily, these brothers are worthy of this sister, and she is so worthy of them." After looking on his face so full of beauty and intelligence, I am not amazed that the brothers will do nothing without their sister's consent. I will now enjoy the sight of this house, which I have heard tell is full of rarities." "Oh, my lord," replied the princess, "it is only a plain country place, fit for such people as we are, who live retired from the world. It is not to be compared with houses in the great cities." Having spoken thus, the princess led the Sultan into the mansion. She conducted him through all the apartments, and the Sultan was filled with wonder and admiration when he saw the magnificent furniture and rich carpets and hangings in every room. The princess opened a door which led to the garden, and the first object which presented presented itself to the Sultan's view was the fountain of golden water that was playing high in the air. The princess then led him to the spot where the singing tree was planted, and there the Sultan heard a most beautiful concert, different from any he had ever heard before. Overcome with amazement, he followed the princess, who conducted him to another part of the garden, where he observed a prodigious number of singing birds in the trees around, filling the air with their songs. These birds, said the princess, come from all parts of the world to accompany the song of a talking bird, which thou mayest perceive in a cage hanging in one of the windows in the hall, in which our repast may be served. His notes are sweeter than those of any other bird, and even those of the nightingale. The Sultan went into the hall, and as the talking bird was singing, the princess raised her voice and said, "O my slave, here is the Sultan, salute him." The talking bird immediately stopped singing, and all the other birds ceased also. "The Sultan is welcome," the bird said. "Allah prosper him and give him long life." After this, the princess placed the Sultan on a couch which was made of alabaster, overlaid with plates of red gold. The two princes entered and seated themselves near the princess, and the slaves brought in the repast. As soon as the Sultan saw the dish of cucumbers, he reached out his hand and took one. But when he had got it, he was astonished to find it stuffed with pearls. "What," cried he, "is this? What design are these cucumbers, filled with such riches, since pearls cannot be eaten?" He then looked at the two princes and the princess, but the talking bird, interrupting him, said, "O my lord, canst thou wonder at the cucumbers stuffed with pearls, and yet so easily believe that thy two sons were a dog and yellow cat, and thy daughter a mouse? Verily, the two sisters of the Sultana were envious of her good fortune, and satisfied their malice and cruelty by deceiving thee. Accuse them, and the sister whom thou, and they will confess their evil deeds. The two brothers and the sister whom thou seest before thee are thine own children. When they were exposed in baskets, the head gardener found them and provided for them and educated them with love and care." Hearing these words, the Sultan was filled with delight. "Bird," cried he, "I believe what thou hast discovered to me is true, for from the first I have been drawn to these young people. Come then, my sons and my daughter, let me embrace you and give you the first marks of a father's love and tenderness." The Sultan then arose and embraced the two princes and the princess, and they embraced him. Then he finished his repast, and arising said, "O my children, ye see in me your father. Tomorrow will I bring the Sultana, your mother, and therefore prepare to receive her." He then mounted his horse and rode to his palace, where he alighted and commanded his vizier to seize the Sultana's two sisters and bring them before him. The vizier did so, and they were brought before the Sultan. They confessed to their crimes and were condemned and instantly beheaded. Then the Sultan Horosha, accompanied by his nobles, went to the palace where the Sultana's cage was hung, and caused her to be taken out. He then embraced her tenderly and wept on seeing the miserable condition to which she was reduced. "O my beloved," he said, "I come to entreat thee thy pardon for the injustice I have done thee, and to make reparation for all I have already punished the wicked wretches who deceived me in such an abominable manner. I hope that thou wilt forget all sorrow when I present to the two accomplished princes and a lovely princess, our children. Come now, and resume thy former rank and all honors that they are due." All this being done, the news spread throughout the city, and the streets were filled with rejoicing people. Early next morning, the Sultan and Sultana, arrayed in magnificent garments, went with all their court to the house built by the head gardener. There the Sultan presented the Princess Bahman and the Princess Parizade to his wife, saying, "These, O my much injured wife, are the two princes thy sons, and the princess thy daughter. Embrace them with tenderness, since they are worthy both of me and thee." The Sultana with tears flowing from her eyes, received her children with joy, on whose account she had so long endured the severest sufferings. The Sultan then mounted his horse, and the Princes Bahman and Perviz on his right hand, and the Sultan, Anna, and the Princess Parizade on his left, followed by the officers of his court. He returned to his capital. Crowds of people came out to meet them, and with acclamations of joy ushered them into the city. All eyes were fixed not only on the Sultana and her children, but also on the talking bird, which the princess carried before her in his cage. Everyone admired his sweet notes, which drew about him all the other singing birds. Thus the Princes Bahman and Perviz and the Princess Parizade were brought to the palace with much pomp and ceremony, and nothing was heard or seen all night. With these rejoicings and illuminations throughout the city, these lasted many days and spread throughout all parts of the Empire of Persia, and after this, the Sultan and his wife and children continued to live together in utmost happiness. And that is the end of this story in the Arabian Nights. I do hope, as always, that you enjoyed this video, and I wish you